The waiting room smelled like burnt coffee and antiseptic and something else. Something older, like wet concrete. Like a building that had absorbed too many bad nights. Nadia pressed her back against the plastic chair and tried to breathe through her mouth. Boston General's ER at 2 a.m. had a specific kind of quiet to it, not peaceful, just exhausted. The fluorescent lights buzzed at a frequency that lived behind her eyes. She'd been on shift for 11 hours, 4 more to go. She was eating a granola bar she didn't taste when the man walked in. He didn't come through the ambulance bay. Didn't come through the sliding doors the way most people did. Hunched, frantic, dragging someone half-conscious behind them. He walked through the main entrance like he'd decided the building belonged to him and was choosing to visit. Black coat, dark eyes scanning the room in a way that had nothing to do with looking for the check-in desk. 2 men followed him at a distance that was too calibrated to be coincidence. He was pressing a folded cloth against his left side. The cloth was dark. It had been white at some point. Nadia stood up before she'd made the decision to stand up. She crossed the waiting room, and she didn't know why she said what she said. Maybe it was the 11 hours. Maybe it was the granola bar. Maybe it was the way he looked. Not afraid, just very, very controlled. The way people looked when they were holding themselves together through sheer calculation. "You need to sit down," she said. He looked at her. Up close, the calculation in his face was more obvious, like he was running numbers behind his eyes constantly. "I'm fine. You're not." She nodded at his side. "That cloth is soaked through. If you don't sit down, you're going to make a scene when you pass out, and then I'm going to have to deal with that." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "You're a nurse? I'm the person telling you to sit down." He sat. His name, she would learn later, was Rowan Steele, but that night she knew none of that. That night he was just a man with a wound, and 2 bodyguards pretending to look at their phones, and she was just a nurse who'd been awake too long to have the patience for stoicism. She got him into a curtained bay in the back, away from the 2 men who stayed in the waiting room without being told to. That detail stayed with her, the fact that they knew to stay without being told. She filed it away and kept her hands moving. "How did this happen?" she asked. "I fell." "Onto what?" "Glass." The wound was a clean slice along his left side, deep enough to need stitches, not deep enough to have hit anything vital. She'd seen worse. She'd seen a lot worse. She cleaned it without flinching, and he watched her do it without making a sound, which was its own kind of unnerving. "This isn't a glass injury," she said without looking up. Silence. "Okay," she said, "you don't have to tell me. But I do have to report any injuries that look like. There's nothing to report." His voice was even. Not threatening, just very certain. She looked up. He was watching her with those calculating eyes, but there was something behind the calculation now. Not warmth, exactly. Curiosity. "Your hands are steady," he said. "I'm a nurse. You're not scared." "Should I be?" The corner of his mouth again. Closer to a smile this time. Most people would be. Most people haven't done triage at this hospital for 3 years. She tied off the last stitch and snapped her gloves off. "Don't lift anything heavy for 2 weeks. If it gets infected, come back. Don't make me come find you." He paused. "Why would you come find me?" She gathered her supplies without looking at him. "I wouldn't. It's something people say." She heard him exhale something that might have been a laugh. He left before she finished charting. The 2 men in the waiting room left with him. She found a folded envelope on the curtain bay's small metal tray. Inside was more cash than she made in a month, and a single business card with nothing on it but a phone number. She almost threw it away. She put it in her scrubs pocket instead, and she didn't think about why. She thought about it for 2 weeks. She didn't call. She wasn't the kind of person who called numbers on unmarked cards left by men who'd lied to her about how they got their injuries. She was the kind of person who worked double shifts and called her mother on Sundays and went to bed early. She was practical. She was sensible. She was the daughter of a woman who'd worked 2 jobs to put her through nursing school and never once let herself be distracted by things that weren't what they seemed to be. She was standing outside a pharmacy on a Tuesday evening when a black car pulled up to the curb. Not the same men. Different ones. But the same posture, the same too deliberate casualness. The window came down. Rowan Steele looked out at her. "I wanted to see if the stitches held," he said. She stared at him for a long moment. Around her, the city moved, cabs, foot traffic, a food cart releasing steam into the cold air, a perfectly ordinary street, a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. "You could have gone to any hospital for that," she said. "I preferred this one. You looked up where I worked. You're not surprised." She wasn't. She wasn't sure what that said about her. "The stitches held," she said. "I know." A pause. "Have dinner with me." "No. Why not?" "Because I don't know who you are. You know my name. I know the name you gave me." The calculation behind his eyes shifted into something that might have been respect. "My name is Rowan Steele," he said. "My family has operated in this city for 20 years. I am. Difficult to explain in a way that would make you comfortable. But I would like to have dinner with you. And I think you're curious enough about what I can't explain that you'll say yes." She should have said no. She knew she should have said no. She thought about the envelope of cash she'd quietly donated to the hospital's patient assistance fund. The business card she'd kept. The 2 weeks of thinking about eyes that ran numbers constantly and hands that had held the cloth against the wound with perfect practiced pressure. "One dinner," she said. Rowan Steele did not own a restaurant, but the way the restaurant behaved when he walked in, he might as well have. A table appeared. The noise around it softened. The waitstaff moved with an awareness of him that wasn't quite the awareness people give to fame. He ordered for both of them without asking, which should have annoyed her. It didn't. He ordered exactly what she would have chosen, which was more unsettling than the ordering itself. "How did you know?" she asked. "You looked at the salmon twice when you opened the menu. Then you looked at the price and reconsidered, and you decided to preempt my reconsidering. I decided you'd ordered the cheaper thing at too many dinners." She looked at him across the white tablecloth. "You're observant. It's necessary." For what? He was quiet for a moment. Not evasive, just finding something. "My family controls import and distribution across most of the Northeast," he said. "Some of what we import is legal." She set down her fork. "I see. I'm telling you because you already know. Not the specifics, but you knew in that hospital room. I watched you know it." She'd known it the way you know certain things without wanting to, the way the wound had looked, the way the men had waited, the way he'd said, "There's nothing to report," with the certainty of someone who knew how that sentence ended. "Why are you telling me at dinner?" she asked. "If you already knew that I knew, because I want you to keep knowing," he said. "And I'd rather you hear it from me than from someone else. Someone else like who?" He looked at her directly. "Your father." The salmon was very good. She ate a bite of it while the room recalibrated around her. "My father," she said carefully, "is an accountant in Cincinnati." "Your father," Rowan said, "is Gerald Ashworth. He retired from accounting in 2019. Before that, he did the books for the Harmon family for 14 years. A pause. "My family and the Harmon family have not always had an easy relationship." Nadia put her fork down. She thought about her father, patient, quiet, who smelled like Old Spice and printer ink, who called her every Sunday the same as she called her mother, who'd never once explained why they moved from Boston to Cincinnati when she was 9, who'd told her it was for her mother's work, and she'd believed him because why wouldn't she believe him? She thought about the card, the envelope, the 2 weeks. "You looked me up," she said. "Before the hospital," he said. "I knew who you were before I walked in." The room was very quiet around their table. "You came to me specifically," she said. "Not a question." "Yes. Why?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I needed to know what you were. And what am I?" "I don't know yet," he said. "That's what dinner is for." She drove home alone. She sat in her car outside her apartment building for 20 minutes without getting out. Her father had worked for a crime family. Her father, who coached her little league team and made Sunday gravy and cried at her nursing school graduation, had kept the books for people who moved things across state lines that weren't supposed to move across state lines. For 14 years, she went upstairs. She poured herself a glass of water she didn't drink. She called her mother. "How's Boston?" her mother asked. "Mum, why did we move when I was 9? Silence that lasted 2 beats too long. For my work, baby. You know that." "Mum." Another silence. Then, "Ask your father, sweetheart. Some things aren't mine to explain." She didn't call her father, not yet. She sat with what she knew and what she was starting to understand, and the specific discomfort of realizing that the ground you've been standing on was different than the ground you thought you were standing on, and that you had, maybe, sensed this for a long time without letting yourself look directly at it. She went to work the next morning. She triaged a construction worker with a broken finger, and an elderly woman with chest pains that turned out to be anxiety, and a teenager who'd gotten a fishhook caught in his earlobe on a dare. She did her job. She did it well. She did it the way she'd always done it, precise and calm and without flinching. Rowan Steele did not contact her for 5 days. On the 6th day, she texted the number on the card. "You said you needed to know what I was." He responded in 40 seconds. "Tomorrow, I'll send a car." "I have my own car," she typed. "I know. I'd rather you had a driver." She thought about that, then. Fine. The building he took her to was not what she expected. She'd expected something cinematic, something that announced itself. What she got was a converted warehouse in the Seaport district that looked, from the outside, like a mid-range architecture firm. Inside, it was quiet in the way that expensive security makes things quiet. He showed her what the family did. Not all of it. She understood she was seeing a curated version, the import side, the distribution logistics, the legitimate freight operation that existed alongside and around and through the parts that weren't legitimate. It was vast. It was organized in a way that required serious minds behind it. "You run this," she said. "My father built it," he said. "He retired 4 years ago. There's a brother in the Chicago operation, a sister who manages the legal side from New York." He paused. "And there is the matter of Gerald Ashworth. My father, your father, has been approached by the Harmon family. They want him back." He said it without inflection. "He's refused twice. The refusals have not been accepted graciously." She looked at him. "You're telling me my father is in danger. I'm telling you your father is currently being watched by people who are not friendly to either of us, and that the fact of who you are, his daughter working in that hospital accessible, has been noted by you, by others before me." The floor of the building was clean, polished concrete. Her shoes made small sounds on it as she turned to face him fully. "You came to that hospital," she said, "to evaluate me. Yes, you had dinner with me to evaluate me, partly. And now?" He was quiet for a moment. "Now I'm telling you the truth because the evaluation is complete and the result concerns me." "What's the result?" "You're exactly who your father raised you to be," he said. Steady, precise, not intimidated by things that should intimidate you. "Which means you're not going to disappear quietly to Cincinnati and let this be handled." He looked at her. "Which means I have a problem." She understood what he was saying. "You thought I'd run," she said. "I thought you might, and if I had, then it would have been simpler." A pause. For everyone. She stood in the converted warehouse in the Seaport district and thought about her father making Sunday gravy and crying at her graduation and spending 14 years keeping the books for people who would, apparently, not take no for an answer. "What happens to him if I run?" she asked. Rowan was quiet. "That's what I thought," she said. She called her father that night. He answered on the second ring, the way he always did, and for a moment she just listened to him breathe on the other end. The particular sound of someone who loves you and is slightly worried about you at all times. The sound of someone's whole life arranged around a secret they've been carrying so long they sometimes forget it's a secret. "Nadia," he said. "How's Boston?" she said. "Dad, I know about the Harmons." Silence. Long enough that she counted her own heartbeats. "Who told you?" he said. Not a question. His voice was different, flattened, careful, the accountant voice underneath the Sunday gravy voice. "It doesn't matter who told me. Are you safe?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. That's not what I asked." Another silence. Then quietly, "It's complicated, Nadia. I know it's complicated. That's why I'm asking. She heard him exhale, the sound of 20 years of carrying something alone. "They want me back," he said. "Someone in the Harmon organization has a tax problem. Significant one. They think I can make it disappear." "Can you?" A pause that answered the question. "Dad, I told them no," he said. "Twice." "I know," told the silence. This time was different. Sharper. Nadia. Her name in his mouth had changed timbre entirely. "Listen to me very carefully. Rowan Steele is not." "I know what he is, Dad. I'm not calling because I trust him. I'm calling because I need to understand what we're dealing with." Another long breath. "How did you even meet him?" "He came to my hospital. Her father stopped. "He came to you, of course he did." A sound that was almost a laugh, except exhausted. "Your mother's going to lose her mind. Don't tell Mum yet. Tell me what they actually want." And he did, slowly, haltingly, in a voice she'd never heard him use before. The voice of the man he'd been before he became her father. He told her about 14 years of numbers and the specific tax problem a man named Harmon's son had created for himself by being careless, and the 2 refusals, and the car that had followed him to the grocery store last Tuesday. When he finished, she sat with it for a moment. "Okay," she said. "Okay," his voice cracked slightly. "Nadia, these are not people you say okay to. I'm not saying it to them. I'm saying it to myself." She pressed her fingers against the bridge of her nose. "I need to make a call. I'll call you back tomorrow." "Nadia, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking about keeping my father safe," she said. "I'll call you tomorrow." She hung up. She sat in her apartment for a long time. Then she texted the number on the card. "I need to know what you want from this, not evaluated me, not my father's situation. What do you actually want from getting involved in this?" 40 seconds. "I want the Harmon problem resolved. Your father's records have information that helps me do that." She stared at the screen. "And me," she typed. 30 seconds this time. "That's more complicated." She put the phone face down on the table and looked at the ceiling of her apartment. The water stain in the corner shaped like a bird. The crack along the plaster she'd been meaning to report to her landlord for 2 years. The ordinary ceiling of an ordinary apartment belonging to a person who was apparently not quite the ordinary person she'd believed herself to be. She picked the phone back up. "Explain complicated," she typed. "In person," he responded. "No, text it." A longer pause this time, almost a minute, then. "I came to your hospital because you were an access point. I stayed because you are not what I expected." What I expected was someone who could be frightened into compliance or bought into it. What I found was someone who stitched a wound without flinching and told me not to make her come find me. She read it twice. "I don't know what to do with someone like that," he typed. "I'm still figuring that out." What followed was not simple. She hadn't expected it to be simple. Rowan's operation ran a fleet of legitimate freight across the Northeast, and buried inside 14 years of Ashworth bookkeeping was a paper trail that connected the Harmon family's tax problem to a federal investigation that had been running quietly for 8 months. The Harmons didn't know about the investigation. The federal agents running it did not know about Rowan Steele. Gerald Ashworth sat at the center of it, knowing too much about too many people, which was why he was being followed to grocery stores and why the refusals weren't being accepted graciously. Nadia spent 2 weeks learning things about money she'd never needed to know. Rowan sat across a table from her in the warehouse and explained them, patiently, precisely, the way someone explains something to a person they've decided is worth explaining things to. She asked questions. She didn't pretend to understand things she didn't understand. He didn't talk down to her. She noticed in those 2 weeks that she was being evaluated again. But differently. This time it wasn't about what she could be frightened into. It was about what she was capable of. She noticed also that she was running her own evaluation. What she found, a man who ran a complicated thing with genuine rigor, who was capable of the loyal in ways that organized themselves differently than the loyalty she'd grown up around. Her father's loyalty to her mother's loyalty to work and family, the ordinary architecture of ordinary people keeping ordinary promises. Rowan's loyalty was to people who'd earned specific things from him, and it was absolute, and it did not extend to people who hadn't. She could trace the shape of it even when she couldn't see all the edges. She wasn't sure what to do with that either. On the 14th day, she said, "I think I know how to fix the tax problem." He looked up from the papers on the table. "The Harmons need someone to make a specific set of records disappear," she said. "They think my father can do that because he created them, but he didn't create the most important ones. He only ever handled the front-facing accounts." She slid a page across the table. "These are the accounts that actually matter for the federal investigation. My father never touched these." Rowan looked at the page. "How do you know this?" "Because I asked him." She paused. "He's been trying to tell them that for 2 refusals. They don't believe him because they think he's hiding to protect himself. But he's not hiding anything. He genuinely doesn't have what they're looking for. Which means they're pressing the wrong person, which means there's someone else in their organization who does have it, and who has a very strong reason to make sure my father stays the focus." Silence. "You've been running an accounting investigation," he said. "I've been talking to my father on the phone for 2 weeks," she said. "He taught me double-entry bookkeeping when I was 12, because he said everyone should understand where money goes." Rowan looked at her. She looked back. "I told you," she said, "that I'm the person who tells you to sit down." The conversation that ended the problem happened without her in the room. That was Rowan's doing. He was firm about it in a way that she recognized as protection rather than exclusion, which was a distinction she was still working out how to feel about. What she knew was this. The name she'd given him, the person inside the Harmon organization who'd been redirecting attention toward her father, was someone Rowan had suspected for a long time without enough confirmation to move. The accounting trail she'd reconstructed from her father's memories gave him that confirmation. 3 days after the conversation she wasn't in the room for, her father called her. "The car stopped following me," he said. She was standing on the roof of Boston General during her break, watching the harbor go gray in the early evening. "Good, Nadia." His voice was careful. "What did you do?" "I talked to someone. Rowan Steele." "Dad, I know. I'm not." He stopped. "He's not a simple person to know. I'm aware. Your mother still doesn't know. I know. You're going to have to tell her eventually." "I know that too." A long pause. The harbor moved below her, grey and cold and enormous, the way it always was, the way it had been her whole life. She'd grown up near water and something in her had always oriented to it, the way water kept moving regardless. "Are you okay?" her father asked. She thought about it honestly. The question deserved honesty. "I think so," she said. "I think I'm figuring something out." "What kind of something?" She watched a cargo ship move slowly across the harbor. She thought about the 14 years her father had never explained. The 9-year-old who'd moved to Cincinnati without understanding why. The nursing school she'd chosen, partly because hospitals were places where you could be useful when things went wrong, which was a skill she'd apparently inherited in some form she hadn't understood until recently. "What kind of person I am," she said, "in a context I didn't know I was in." Her father was quiet for a moment. "Your grandmother," he said finally, "was a very difficult woman, in the specific way that some women are difficult when the world has underestimated them for a long time." Another pause. "You always reminded me of her." She didn't know what to say to that. "I love you, Dad. I love you, sweetheart. Tell your mother soon." She hung up. The harbor kept moving. The cargo ship was very small now, almost to the edge of what she could see. Rowan found her on the roof. She didn't ask how he knew she was there. The answer was the same answer it always was, and she'd stopped being unsettled by it. He stood beside her and looked at the harbor and didn't say anything for a moment. He did that, gave silence's room. She'd come to understand it as something deliberate, not a gap in conversation, but a decision to let a moment exist before moving through it. "Your father is safe," he said. "I know. He called me." The person inside the Harmon organization has been addressed. She didn't ask what that meant. She was learning to know what she needed to know and let the rest be shaped differently. "The federal investigation," she said, "will proceed without involving your father." His name has been removed from the relevant context. A pause. Legally, nothing that could create a problem for him. She looked at him. Can you actually do that? I have a lawyer who is extraordinary at finding distinctions that matter. She turned back to the harbor. He spent 14 years being careful, she said. He thought he was protected by how careful he was. He was protected by how careful he was. For 14 years, until he wasn't, until I needed the problem resolved. She looked at him again. The calculating eyes were there. They were always there. But there was something behind them now that she'd been watching develop over the last 2 weeks, something that wasn't calculation. Are you going to tell me you're sorry? She asked. For using the situation? No, he said. I used it. I'd do it again. The problem needed to be resolved, and your father's records were the path to resolving it. He held her gaze. What I'll tell you is that the outcome is better than I expected. Because of you. Because you found the thing I'd been looking for, the accounting trail. Yes, and that's what I am to you? Useful. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the harbor. No, he said. That's what you were when I walked into that hospital. What you are now is more difficult to categorize. He paused. I told you the evaluation was complete. That was true. I didn't tell you what it concluded. She waited. It concluded, he said, that you are someone I would like to continue knowing in a context that is honestly explained, without an agenda. The harbor moved. Cold air off the water. The specific smell of Boston in November. Salt and exhaust, and something almost metallic. My hands were steady, she said. Your hands were steady, he agreed. And you told me not to make a scene when I passed out. You weren't going to pass out. No. Something at the corner of his mouth. But I appreciated the concern. She looked at him for a long moment. I'm going to keep working here, she said. I'm a nurse. That's what I do. I'm not interested in being managed or protected or whatever the word is for how your world handles people who know too much. I know. And I need to tell my mother about all of this, which is going to be a conversation. I don't envy you that conversation. No, she looked back at the harbor. And I'm going to need you to explain at some point what more difficult to categorize means, in a way that doesn't require me to wait for a text. She heard him exhale, quiet, almost a laugh. In person, he said. In person, she said. With dinner, and I'm ordering for myself this time. The harbor kept moving, enormous and grey and indifferent, the way water is. The cargo ship was gone now, past the edge of sight, somewhere she couldn't see. She found she was okay with that. You couldn't see everything from where you were standing. Some things moved out of view and kept moving, and the water kept going, and you stood where you stood and figured out the next thing. She'd always been good at the next thing.